Hey, Dave Lotan, chairman of Aurion Resources. Aurion is a gold exploration company working in Finland with multiple discoveries. We have investments from or partnerships with 3 major producers. We think that Lapland is the next emerging gold camp, and we have 1,000 square kilometers of it.
You do. You have a lot of it. Have you been there? Have you been over?
Many times, yeah. Every time we take a major company out, I like to attend those meetings and make sure that we're putting our best foot forward in terms of those relationships. So I've probably taken 7 companies out.
Okay. Yeah. I'm really glad you're in London. By the way, welcome to London, I should say. Welcome here, because we've talked like online, and we're finally meeting face to face. You're over at the conference. You're obviously doing the rounds over there. What type of investors are you seeing?
Well, fewer than in the past. I think that the interest in junior gold plays is probably at a trough or a nadir, whatever you want to call that at the moment. But we've been here probably for 5 consecutive years. We have some pretty large shareholders out of London, so that's always a good reason to come here. And I think that there's an underlying interest in gold stories in the UK and Europe that is always there, and it's really incumbent on the companies to find those investors and make sure that they hear the story.
Right. I wanted you to come here today because I've been talking to companies about their strategies, their business plans and strategies, and how they deliver those and who's going to deliver them.
Sure.
And I think in this market, it's been really important for juniors to be a little bit more agile, to just think about what's going on. Doing the same thing over and over sometimes doesn't work. So can we just kind of lay that out for people now? Because there's a few areas I want to go down. So you've kind of got a parallel track going on. So explain that.
Indeed. Yeah, agile, flexible, for sure. So Aurion started its life as a prospect generator. I think we discussed that in our very first interview, and we made a fairly significant discovery on our 100% owned ground and had to decide whether or not we would pivot from a company that mostly partnered its properties to a company that was going to put its own capital at risk in high risk and very expensive exploration programs. We had some pretty good luck early on with the discovery, bringing capital in at 10 times where the stock had traded only 20 or so months previously. So we got money in at $1.50 after having been a 50-cent stock the year before from some pretty good investors in Canada. And then we got money in from Kinross at $2.30 a share. Gold Corp invested in the company at $2.80 a share through the stock market. So the discovery was well capitalized in its early stages, and that's been a bit of a lifeline since it proved to be more difficult than we had hoped. But we didn't fully abandon our roots as a company that was doing partnerships. And one of our legacy partnerships with B2 Gold turned out to be a property that was immediately beside Rupert's wonderful Ikkari discovery. And after 4 years and probably close to $14 million spent, this gave B2 some pretty crucial evidence about where a gold deposit might be on that property. It took about 8 or 9 months to get the permits in force and to get drills over to that part of the property, but they made a discovery within a couple of drill holes. And so while our own discovery has gone into hibernation over the last couple of years, as we discussed, we lost our founder, Mike Bash, in 2019, and we're really scrambling over COVID to get the company under a new leadership regime and to think about how to repurpose exploration. Thankfully, this joint venture has begun to produce value, I think, pretty significantly.
Right. So B2 is putting money in the ground, and they've put $14 million in the ground.
Yes.
What are they doing next? So you said they're encouraged to do what? Throw more money at it?
Well, yes, and I mean that's our business, really. These producing companies have pipelines that always need to be refilled, and they refill those pipelines by doing brownfields exploration around their existing mines. But brownfields ounces, while they're cheaper to produce, doesn't lead to the next 20 million ounce deposit or 10 million ounce deposit or 5 million ounce deposit. Usually you're just adding production, you're adding back reserves equivalent to production that you've taken out of the ground in the prior years. So greenfields projects are where the sort of super growth comes from for these companies. And some of the companies, and B2 is one of them, always like to be spending the high-risk greenfield dollars looking for the next large opportunity. And so Finland is, I think, something that's risen very high on their priority list. And that's probably because Rupert's Ikkari discovery has proven to be 4 million ounces in such a
short period of time. I know. It's
insane. Compact capital and compact drilling meters. So
right. Let's explain the setup here, because the model is really important for people to get. Right. Because as you say, it's choppy waters for explorers. B2 have put a bunch of money in so far. What's the split in terms of the equity split there, in terms of their earn-in? And more importantly, are you carried?
Yeah, so we're not carried. It's a 70-30 joint venture. Right. They spent $15 million to earn their 70%. They had the option to go to 75, which would have required them to produce a feasibility study.
Right. And
arrange our project debt. We anticipate that would have been $50 million. And so with only 3 holes into the discovery, that would have given it $1 billion valuation. And we expected to be asked to contribute. We were extremely well financed for a junior at the time. We had $25 million in the bank. Our contribution this year was $3 million to start. When they increased the budget, our contribution went up to $4.5 million.
Yeah.
Perhaps next year they could spend $20 million on the property, and that would be $6 million from us. We have that money in the bank, and another $6 million on top of that.
How much is sitting on the bank?
Well, we probably had $19 million in the bank on June 30th, and we're budgeting to end the year at about $12 million in the bank.
Okay.
So if it's a $20 million budget, we've got the dough set aside, and that still leaves us money to continue to work our own property.
Right, and we'll come on to that in a second. But as a model, you've got the cash. You can meet your requirements for next year, right. But you're kind of like riding on their coattails, right? They are in charge of the pace at which they move. It may be 20 million, it may be 10, maybe 5. Who knows?
Correct.
But so in terms of the valuation of the company, it's hard to kind of drive the value of the company when you're not in control, right?
It is.
Hence, you got to move your own stuff forward, the stuff that you can be in control of, and allocate capital. Indeed. But it sounds like you've got money for that too. So what are you doing? Right.
So the pause that we had to take as a result of losing Mike and having COVID happen simultaneously had one further side effect. During that period, Rupert made the Ikkari discovery, and of course, it's not just close to our joint venture border, but it's quite close to our own property as well.
Yeah.
And Mike had been focused on these quartzite sediments and outcropping gold, which we had in incredible quantities.
Yeah.
But Rupert's discovery is in a different host rock, which tends to result in more disseminated gold deposits. And of course, Ikkari is an amazing discovery. It's large, it's geometrically simple, and it's incredibly continuous. And this is why you're able to get 4 million ounces in only 36,000 meters. And again, the last time we talked about these multi-100,000 meter Abitibi drill campaigns where you're going through hundreds of meters of dead rock to get to a narrow high-grade target, which is what we had at Omarusco. It's a narrow, high-grade vein system with some halos around the veins. It's certainly, we think, is a world-class discovery. But at 40 or 50 cents a share, how much money do you want to spend on that kind of a target? Yep. So with the discovery, with the revelation of Ikkari, we decided we need to look in those rocks. There won't just be one of those. And that's already been demonstrated because B2 made the Helm discovery literally the next year. And it isn't at the moment, I think, as good as Ikkari. It's about half as wide, and it goes about 1.5 grams, whereas Ikkari goes 2.5 grams. But it's 3 times the strike length already, and 7 kilometers along strike, we have a historical gold occurrence. And so we think there'll be more. We think the growth is on our side. But more importantly, we might have 1 or 2 of these on our own ground. And we weren't looking in those rocks. So that's going back to square one and doing basic till testing. And once you develop an inventory of targets there, you hit those with a scout drilling program. And that's in progress right now.
Right. Need to tell people you are a big shareholder of this. You were a shareholder and you've had to step up to the plate.
Sure.
to help steer the ship, as it were. Obviously, it might, sad situation there, but you've had to do that. You've also hired Maddie, who we've spoken to and had a technical interview with, knows the area, knows what he's doing by the sounds of it. But how do you talk to your current shareholders, of which you are a major one?
The biggest.
I'm not talking about the institutional guys, right? I'm talking about the retail guys looking in at this thing and going, do you know what, guys, it's going to be okay. We've come from a difficult place. Mm-hmm. We've got a plan. We're delivering this dual track approach to the value creation. Markets are difficult, but it's going to be okay. How do you reassure them about the it's going to be okay bit?
Well, and this is a good point. So last year I put a couple $1 million in, and I did that all through the stock market because if we're going to meet investors and attempt to persuade them to be a part of the story with us, they're likely going to have to come in through the stock market. So that's the way I get my stock. I put in another $1 million this year. And one of the things we'd like investors to understand is, given that our commitment as a team, and the team doesn't have quite as much equity as I do, but we make decisions together. We are live on the risk. Yeah. We are increasing our risk. Increasing our exposure as the stock goes down and I suppose becomes more risky. So all the decisions that we're making first for all stakeholders, because in this day and age, you really need to make sure you look after your primary constituency, which is the communities that you're working in and the country that you're working in. But secondly, to make the stock go up. We don't want to be one of those companies with $1 billion shares.
But that's the bit I want to hear about. That's the bit I want to hear about from you, because look, you're in it, and you've doubled down, right? Okay, you've doubled down and that could be super smart or it could be super stupid, right? So I'm interested in the bit where you go, I have confidence in the way that we have now reinterpreted the opportunity ahead of us. Right. We're in the right. Well, Finland's awesome. We know that. And Ikkari is something that you can point to because it's literally next door and go, it's worth that. But how are you going to maximize your chance of success? What are the actual things that you're going to do or now going to do which maximize that opportunity?
Right. So the surface shear zone, which is the structure that we think has pumped all the fluids that has deposited all this gold in various places, runs on our property for about 80 kilometers. That's the B2 property and our 100% owned ground as well. Assuming that that's the source of the fluids, the chances that those fluids passed all the way over to Ikkari and dropped a beautiful, consistent, simple, efficient gold deposit there and didn't drop something else along the way is incredibly remote. Yeah. So we've taken the Rupert playbook, which was primarily to do base-to-till sampling, and where we have good geophysics and where we have other vectors. For instance, we have gold in the very proximate outcropping sediments. Those are drill targets. And every day, the company is drilling a hole, which could be the next Ikkari. Every day, the company's drilling a hole, which I guess could be the next Amorusko as well. But we are now looking in the rocks that tend to create the larger, easier gold deposits. Those were covered. We were a prospecting company. Almost all the work we did for years was in the outcropping sediments. And now we're in, given the evidence that Rupert has provided to us of where the bigger fish, the easier fish will be, that's where we're looking now. And as I said, every week we're probably onto a new target with the drill. And every week we could be onto the next deposit.
Okay. And you're managing the pace at which you go, Nick, because clearly no one wants to be going raising money. Well, you definitely don't at these prices. You've been a lot higher previously. You've been punished like every other precious metal company in the market at the moment. So you will manage the pace. Is it literally a new target every week? Is it? When you say it's a new target every week, do you literally mean there's a new hole going in once a week?
I'd say so, yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and frankly, I can't know the details of the programs at a granular level because, of course, I'm frequently buying stock in the market. But understanding our schedule, it takes probably 2 months still to get assays these days because there's a big bottleneck in getting core cut up and smashed up and sent off to the labs. So what we want to do is work. Let's say we have 25 high priority targets at the moment from the base of till work we've already done, the geophysics, and from past programs. What we want to do is put 1 or 2 holes into each one of those targets,
Right.
move on to the next target, and the next, and the next, and eventually we'll get assays back from target number 1. And if we hit, well, then the whole game changes. You move on to a different pathway.
Yeah.
And, there are multiple ways for companies in our position to succeed. The first way is to find something fantastic and easy and hit it on the first drill hole, and the second and third and the fourth. And well, that's what Ikkari looks like. Of course, James and Charlie toiled for 4 or 5 years doing generative work, and I think they might have drilled 80 holes in various different targets before they hit Ikkari. And so I don't think the journey will be quite that long for us. We have evidence that they didn't have, thanks so much to James and Charlie. And of course, we have all the work we've done, outcropping exposures, and a playbook, which I think is now proven for the region.
Yeah, okay. I guess you've got a few shortcuts in there, which you didn't pay for, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's always good if you don't have to pay for stuff. But okay, so B2 got the money for that. When will they know what that drill program looks like? When will we know what that drill program looks like?
So I think they're on the tail end of 18,000 meters this year, and I'll remind you that Ikkari turned it to 4 million ounces in only 36,000 meters of drilling. We've hit consistently over 2 kilometers of strike now. And as I said, while it's 3 times the Ikkari strike length, it's narrower and it's slightly lower grade at the moment. Perhaps we'll hit some higher grade domains in there, which will change our view of that. But at the moment, the growth seems to be laterally and to the west. Okay. So we don't know exactly what holes they're drilling now, but we do believe that their priority is to continue to grow the footprint. Okay. Look for the edges, as people say. And we think they want to make it big as quickly as they can, or determine that it won't be.
You see, here's the difficult thing for us poor retail investors, is trying to comprehend how to value that, right? B2 have a bunch of stuff going on all over the world, they do. Right? They've had some wins and they've had some tricky moments. You've got 30% of whatever this thing's valued at, and I'm not quite sure how to value it.
Yeah.
This thing. So how do I then attribute that? And how do I say, well, I need to pile in and buy some stock?
Sure. Well, you had Dave Garofalo here. I don't know, was it last year?
We spoke to him.
Yeah, it was a fantastic interview. I greatly enjoyed your series on royalty companies. And I particularly enjoyed Dave's lecture on the Odyssey royalty that they bought when they bought Abitibi royalty. He was talking about giving Jimmy Lee the double bump. So Dave bought Abitibi royalties for Glenn Mullen's 3% NSR on a portion of the Malartic property. And Glenn had a 30% JV on a portion of Malartic that would be called Gouldy, and on a portion of Malartic that would become Odyssey, the underground future of Malartic, a 2-gram underground mine, which is quite low grade actually. And it was a 3%, so he had a 30% JV on that. When Osisko sold itself to Agnico and Yamana, Glenn sued, claiming that his ROFR had been triggered, and they settled by giving him a 3% NSR and $35 million worth of Agnico and Yamana stock. Over about a year, that stock rose to a $300 million market cap, and then Dave kindly bought it for, I think, maybe $330 million after it had paid for a couple of years. So there are all kinds of data points out there. Obviously, there are fewer minority interests that you see monetized at that level than there are sole risk discoveries, because, of course, minority interests are a subset of the total number of exploration successes we've seen over the years. The Great Bear 2% NSR on Dixie just traded for $200 million. And we could go back in history and look at some other data points. And I like to look at those royalties because often minority interests get diluted down below 10%, and then automatically there's a royalty that can't be diluted. And we have such a clause in our deal as well. In other cases, Reservoir Capital in Serbia, Miles was able to continue to contribute to the program, and his share of TMOC ended up selling Reservoir for $500 million. AUEX, which was in a joint venture with, Frontier Gold, our favorite promoter, Marco Day, AUX had a 49% share of Long Canyon and was able to sell that for $300 million so that Frontier could sell itself to Newmont for close to $2 billion. So it's tricky to monetize minority interests, but one common thread amongst all of those success stories is that those companies were able to contribute or they were carried. It's one or the other. So we aren't carried, but we are funded to contribute.
Okay, there's a difference between valuing it and monetizing it.
There is indeed.
Right? So right now I'm interested in the valuing it because you're at 55 million, 60 million market cap kind of company right now.
Yes.
With a whole bunch of your value, I suspect, allocated to the B2 joint venture, right? Mm-hmm. So is it fairly valued? Is it heavily discounted at the moment? Have I got some upside that I can ride if B2 keep hammering those dollars in the ground next year? That's the bit that I'm really keen on.
Sure.
Or do we kind of flatline for a little bit longer and let's see what happens at some point?
Well, I think the easiest thing for the company to do right now, in consideration of its stock price, is to move forward deliberately, drilling off targets that could be new discoveries. Mm-hmm. When James hit on Ikkari in 10 holes, they added $800 million of market capitalization.
Yeah.
And the most likely place you will find another Ikkari is either on our ground or on the joint venture ground or on James' ground. So we're in the right neighborhood.
For sure, but I guess I'm not articulating particularly clearly. I'm saying I think there's two ways that people looking in are looking at your company in terms of valuing them and trying to work out, are you fully valued right now or not? Mm-hmm. And it's the B2 portion, I suspect, is a large part of how you're currently valued. And the exploration, blue sky, I'm in the right jurisdiction, in fact, the right part of the world, because I'm sitting beside all of this lovely gold next door. There's that bit of it, right? So there's two things. I'm trying to work out the B2 bit, because I think if you can help people understand how to value that, I think
Sure.
that's a real quick win for you. The other is blue sky, wishful thinking, and good planning, and luck, and timing, and a few dollars, right? The usual exploration stuff. But this thing feels a little bit closer to reality because you've got a big boy in there.
Mm-hmm. And not just B2, obviously. Kinross owns 10%
Absolutely.
of our stock, and Newmont owns 3% of our stock. We tried to get the block from Newmont this year. They wouldn't sell it, which was a happy answer to get back. We had to find a block from someone else for an incoming investor. Mm-hmm. And obviously, the location of Rupert's discovery and the location of our Helm discovery would lead one to believe that perhaps they're the same deposit.
Right.
My hope and belief is that James' deposit will grow in various directions on his property, and my hope and belief is that our deposit will grow in various directions on our property. And so when you consider the synergies between the two projects, and when you consider the presence of B2 as a partner, Kinross as a strategic investor in us, Newmont as a semi-strategic investor of us, Agnico as a 14% shareholder of Rupert, having a gold mine in country, I think the chances for this area, which is producing new gold discoveries every year, to be of interest and to be consolidated is maybe on the higher end of likely. Mm-hmm. And I guess there are a variety of paths that could take. Assuming none of them start with us, it would potentially be beneficial on its own. But the immediate path to value, and I'm giving you a very long answer to
Give me a short one.
To a short question.
I want a short one.
the immediate path to value is the joint venture begins to look larger as more drilling comes back. And I think there are many investors in our stock who are sophisticated. You know, you've had Rick Rule on the program before, and a bunch of Rick stockbrokers in San Diego have keen eyes on the stock. They became investors after the joint venture discovery was made, and you know, they love to support companies like Cornerstone, for instance, in Ecuador, and they were all big investors they're all big investors in all the prospect generation companies, and they love it when a little guy has a tag of a big discovery because they know they're the guys, they're the constituency for that. And then it's a boutique opportunity. So I think as the joint venture grows, and I think it will grow, it'll really just be up to us to help close the gap through marketing, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And along the way, the programs that we're running have a pretty good chance of yielding something else. And then it'll be our job to get that into the value of the stock as well. Are there things in the stock that aren't valued right now? Ameresco has a zero value. I would argue that all the value in our stock, if you take the cash out, is in the joint venture, and even that's at a discount. Ameresco is a beautiful discovery. It could be quite a substantial discovery. But again, are you going to go after that kind of target? It would be triple the drill density of Ikkari, and given we know that those styles or that style of deposit is present, we can't lose the opportunity to find one of those by putting our efforts into Ameresco at triple the drill density. So, but it is economically significant. It isn't being worked. It's been forgotten. It's had a whole bunch of newfound gold style holes in it, and it will be monetized in some way, shape, or form if and when this camp comes together and gets consolidated. What's it worth? I can't say at the moment. However, there's enough data on it, I think, to tie its value, for instance, to the value of the Rupert Mill that's on care and maintenance right now, were we to join all these properties together. So I think that these are always path-dependent stories. And we've been knocked off of our optimum path, which was we made a discovery and we thought it would be easy, and it was a little bit harder. And on to our second best path, which is multiple discoveries, one, however, in a partnership, and others in development. And I feel like when you look at where good gold assets are trading now in good jurisdictions, Malartic, half of Malartic just traded for $3 billion. It's got a 5.6% royalty load on it, and it was still worth that much money. It's a 1 gram gold deposit going to a 2 gram underground deposit. So I feel like we're in the right jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. I feel like the camp is exploding with new discoveries every year. And I think that this is a product which works for all gold investors. Cheap, torquey.
Give me this. I've got to stop you. You've sold it. I oversold this. I'd expect nothing less, given your background. Look, stay in touch about this. I think the exciting bit for me is you've got the money to meet your commitments with B2. You've got your money to do what you want to do with your own exploration for next year. Let's see what that brings us.
And we're running the company for shareholders, Matthew.